Sit down, sit down. Countrymen and countrywomen, greetings. I am here today to remind you of the challenges we have been able to face and successfully handle together with you in the last 3.5 years. The following have been the challenges. Locusts, NZJ, you remember the locusts. The rising waters of the lakes, the landslides, the floating islands that were threatening to destroy the power dams, the armyworms, Kanyananga, the COVID-19 pandemic, the terrorist attacks in Kampala, and the Vijambia, who were killing people in Masaka. The resurgence of cattle rustling in Karamoja and the surrounding areas. And recently, the rising costs of commodities on account of the globe, the world, recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine. As usual, those who do not believe in God and who don't believe in themselves started panicking and predicting doom. However, with the NRM fraternity, whom God has enabled to handle even bigger problems in the past, such as the wars emanating from the unconstitutionalism in Uganda between 1966 and 1986. We are sure that each and every one of these challenges could be rationally, not irrationally, handled and resolved. As we speak today, many of these challenges have been handled. Indeed, many Ugandans may have even forgotten about these problems. They will no longer remember about the locusts, they may not remember. Where are the locusts? Where are the floating islands? Where are the rising waters? etc. Of all these problems, the COVID-19 pandemic was the most challenging. Why? It was because after a quick but careful analysis, we saw that the pandemic could indeed be handled, but with massive lockdowns, starting with the unprecedented sending home prematurely of our 15 million grandchildren, the learners, pupils, students in the primary schools, the secondary schools, the tertiary institutions, and the universities, and keeping them there for 1.5 years. I do not think that this figure included the pre-primary pupils. No sooner had the pandemic confronted us than the struggle between the two lines, in quotes, to use Mao Zedong's words, started. The struggle between the two lines. Whenever there's a problem, you get two contending lines. This is the struggle between the correct line of the revolutionaries, the change makers, and the line of the reactionaries that we call in Swahili wapinga maendeleo. The struggle between, if you want to use biblical terms, the narrow path that leads to heaven and the broad road umuhanda rigendwa, they say in Nyankore, that leads to Gehenna, to hell. As it says in the book of Matthew, chapter 7, verses 13 to 14. In Nyankore they say, akahanda kafunzire, the narrow path that leads to salvation, as opposed to the broad road that leads that leads to damnation. In the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verses 26-28, it talks of man establishing dominion over nature. As I normally like to quote, it goes as follows, in quotes. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground." End of quotes. Right from the beginning, therefore, God empowered man to use his superior brain to find solutions to the problems that confronted him. So therefore, whenever we, the NRM, face all these problems, we are sure that with the genuineness, without deceit, we can solve any problem in fairness. And we always stand on the side of justice. We always fight only just wars of fairness. In the struggle between the two lines, therefore, was as follows. The revolutionary side, our side, pointed out that what was primary was to avoid death, massive death, so that is when we were dealing with the corona. All other obligations, or other problems notwithstanding. That was the problem. Avoid death, massive death. When many people die in Nyankore, they call it a chorezo. Avoid a chorezo. The reactionary line was to emphasize the loss of jobs, loss of businesses, loss of school time, pregnancies of young girls, etc. Our line was that ebizibu problems are not equal or comparable to death or kufa. That was our line. You cannot compare ebizibu. I think somebody told me that in Acholi they call it peko. You cannot compare them with death. Death is irreversible, while the problems are reversible at the appropriate time. Our Uganda people say, ekitata muhima tekimala konti. Which means that if a muhima, a cattle keeper, doesn't die, keeps life, even if he loses cows, he will recover them in the future. What were the results of the struggle between the two lines? Because this was really serious. You remember we were being pressurized to do things, open up churches, schools. You could even hear some of our church people arguing as if God is only in buildings. And yet when I was studying the catechism in Runyankore, I knew that God is omnipresent. This was 1957 when I was studying for my confirmation. So how could people argue strongly that people should risk their lives to congregate in any place, including the church or the mosque, as if God is only in the church or the mosque? So we didn't accept those wrong arguments. Now, as a result of that struggle between the two lines, and we insisting on our line, what were the results of the struggle between the two lines? The extreme example of the line of ebizibu problems are equal to death or kufa, because some people were arguing that problems people were facing, loss of jobs, loss of businesses, pregnancies of girls, were like death, were equal. For us, we are saying, no, they are not. They are problems, but they are not equal. Death is unique and is not comparable. The extreme example of the line of ebuzibu problems are equal to death or kufa was the European country of Sweden. There's a country called Sweden, which from the beginning said, no, for us, we shall continue open as if there is no problem, because I don't know how they were arguing. But they are the one of those who never closed from the beginning. Up to now, they have a total of 18,941 people dead from the small population of 10.2 million people. Other countries were oscillating between the two lines, and the losses up to today are as follows. United States, I hear they have reached 1 million people who died. But here, they have got the figure of 993,691. I think this is a slightly older figure, but I saw in the news the other day, even Mr. Biden was saying that they have surpassed 1 million dead, the United States. UK, 177,890. France, 144,000 something. Germany, 138,000. Italy, 165,000. Spain, 105,000. India, 524,000. South Africa, 100,000. Argentina, 128,000. Brazil, 665,000. In Uganda, the death toll up to now is 3,600 out of a total of 164,000 that were infected. Our total population is now 43 million people. Those are the results of the recent struggle between the two lines. Our death from corona up to March 2021 were only 335 persons. By March last year, 2021, we had lost only 335. It was the indiscipline of the opposition during the elections that pushed the figures to the president 3,600. On account of the strictness, taking the biblical narrow path, Uganda, up to now, has had 2 waves of the corona pandemic, while other countries have had 3, and I hear even 4 waves. In Uganda, we say, akutwala ekiro omusiima bukedde. The one who successfully guides you in the night, you thank him in the morning for the good work. Now that we are emerging from the consecutive nights of problems, locusts, rising waters of the lakes, terrorism, cattle rustling, COVID-19, etc. It is time to both thank the NRM and reconfirm its credentials as a no-nonsense problem solver. As the other problems were being solved or were waning in severity, in comes the problem of high costs for commodities. Of course, the problem of high commodity prices is much easier to deal with, and it is not new. At the beginning of the NRM administration in 1986, and for the period 1972 to 1986, following the expulsion of the Ugandan Indian entrepreneurs by Idi Amin, Uganda experienced continuous high inflation, severe shortages of commodities, which were called so-called essential commodities, very high prices, forex black market called kibanda, smuggling of goods out and into Uganda, magendo, and speculation, okusamula. All these were solved by the NRM. And indeed, the recent problem of ekyengera, omweru Runyankore, ekyengera in Uganda, omweru Runyankore, meaning surplus, a glut, when you have got very many products of sugar, soap, maize, milk, bananas, cement, mitayimbwa, steel bars, and other industrial products is a result of that success. It is because we handled the shortages of 1986 correctly that recently we have been having the opposite problem of too much surplus, which had no internal market. This is why we have been engaging with neighbors, e.g. Tanzania, Kenya, to help us solve the problem of ekyengera, surpluses, omweru. How did the NRM solve the problem of Ebola lyebintu, eibura, shortages of between 1972 and 1986? We shall see how in this document later. However, this history is clear. Therefore, the recent phenomenon of high commodity prices is indeed a problem, but it is easier to solve than, for instance, COVID-19 was. COVID-19 needed severe restrictions and new science, e.g. vaccines. It was a new problem. It needed new solutions and a lot of restrictions. The problem of the high prices, this one, would be solved with existing knowledge, but rightly applied. The high commodity prices are from the following factors. Number one, the end of COVID-19 pandemic meant that sectors of the economy in the whole world, sectors of the economy in the whole world that had been closed, such as hotels, suddenly opened. When the production of, for instance, palm oil for soap manufacture had also declined because there had been no demand for 2 years. You see, that's the problem. There was a pandemic, hotels were closed, schools were closed, places where people gather were all closed. So, if I am producing palm oil to make soap for people who are gathered in schools, in hotels, in gathering places, now the demand for soap goes down because, yes, people are still using soap in the homes, but it is not the same amount as when people are gathered in hotels, in schools, in gathering places. So the demand for soap went down. So when the demand for soap goes down because of closing of hotels, then the manufacturers also either got bankrupt, because some of the people got bankrupt, the ones who are selling who are depending on selling products for making soap. And some of the factories were closed, because you remember, Corona also meant closing of factories, because factories also were a target of Corona. So because of that, either the suppliers went bankrupt or some of them even went to other products, converted instead of producing for soap, I can convert my my palm oil to petroleum, because they can change. So when now the economy opens suddenly, the demand is no longer able to meet the supply is no longer able to meet the demand. They resumed production. The resumed production levels cannot yet match the demand. That's one problem. Number two, I also hear that some of the producers decided to turn their palm oil into petrol, just like we were about to turn our surplus sugar into petrol as a way of solving the problem of chengara, of sugar. You remember we've been stuck with sugar here. Our production is now 700,000 tons of sugar per year in Uganda, from zero in 1986. But our internal consumption is 380,000. So as we speak now, there's a surplus of 320,000. So we have been begging our neighbors, please take the sugar. Sometimes they take, sometimes we have been begging them. We have been seeing us in meetings with Kenya, with Tanzania, with Rwanda, which had closed the border, but now they have opened. Congo have not, they have been taking, and South Sudan. We are very happy. But because of the continued uncertainty, we are now going to move away from just depending on sugar for tea, brown sugar, raw sugar. We are saying, okay, why don't we convert our sugar into petroleum? Because then the demand will be endless. And we had resolved on that, but recently some of our neighbors have started buying again. So similarly, these producers of palm oil, I hear that they have started converting it into petroleum. Then number three, the war in Ukraine and the Western sanctions on Russia have also caused shortages of wheat for the bread eaters that do not include me, because I am a muhogo, karo, banana eater, and milk drinker. Also shortages of fertilizers. Apparently Russia is a big producer of fertilizers, petrol, gas, etc. So the war in Ukraine has also now created another problem. Again here, we confront the struggle between the two lines now. Now that we have this problem, then the two lines come. The struggle between the two lines. The right line of revolution, of truth, of development, and another line, which I will describe. The revolutionary line, patriotic line of the truth and seriousness on the one hand, and the reactionary line of populism, cheap popularity, and lack of realism, of talking about price controls by the government, subsidies, tax cuts. On the other hand, the argument now comes up. The two arguments. Although this is not as serious as COVID-19, the choices here are also with serious implications. It is a choice between Okubandama collapse of the economy on the one hand, or survival, or kwetasa, or khona on the other hand. The real medicine for high prices and shortages is increased production. Produce more if you can. In 1986, as we were beginning to deal with the catastrophic situation of the shortages that had characterized Uganda for 14 years, starting with the 1972 mistake of Idi Amin of expelling our Asian business people, there was talk by some of price and rent control. I remember very well. The government must control the prices. The government must control rent, that we should go to control rent. In one cabinet meeting, we were informed of an Indian known as Gandesha that owned many buildings in Kampala and was charging exorbitant rents. Some in the cabinet were saying that we should invoke the Rent Control Act. I didn't know there was such an act. That there was a Rent Control Act, and the government should set the rent levels itself. After careful analysis, we rejected that logic. The solution we adopted was letting rent levels remain high for that time. This would attract many people to invest in housing. It is that flooding into housing that would solve the problem of high rents by making rentable buildings many. That is how the huge growth of buildings in the Kampala, Entebbe, Wakiso, Mukono area was triggered. So if you are looking for an experiment of how you handle this, you go and see what's happened around Kampala, Entebbe. I remember that debate very well in the old State House. I even remember where people were sitting. The debate between government controlling your rent and government allowing the market to stimulate investment. Within a year or two from the beginning, I started hearing of there being so many houses to rent that many of them had no people to rent them. I don't know the situation now. Because at that time I started hearing that you could build a house and nobody comes to rent it. In other words, the houses were more than the people wanted to rent buildings. Because of that stimulus, we applied. Shauk, Shambagira. This is the way Banyankora have got a way of charging the riddle. It's called a riddle. Say, Shauk. You're charging somebody to see whether he is sharp. Shauk. Then he answers Shambagira. Then you give the riddle. You tell him the riddle. The riddle I put to the people is Nyabwenje no bwenjewe. Each wise person has got his own smart solutions to problems. Who will answer the riddle? What is the answer to the riddle? The answer is Nenkoko Kutrucha Etene Mabere. It is the hen bringing up its chicks when it has no breasts to feed them. That is the answer to the riddle. How does the hen, because other animals suckle their young ones, the humans, the goats, the cows, but the Banyankora were intrigued of how the hen can bring up its children when it has no breasts. So how to solve problems in a smart way in spite of bottlenecks. Now, coming to the issue of the high commodity prices of petrol, diesel, sugar, salt, bar soap, powder soap, cooking oil, etc., we have to remember the nature of the challenge. Kubandama, collapse, or survive. Kweta Honoka. As already pointed out above, the problem of high commodity prices is not as dangerous as COVID-19. However, if it is not handled correctly, it can lead to collapse of the economy. Yet, with patience and correct response, it will turn out to be an advantage to the country. If you mishandle it, it can cause collapse. But if you handle it well, it will actually become an advantage. Straight away, a serious problem solver would cluster the commodities with high prices into two categories. The imported ones on the one hand, and the locally produced ones on the other hand. You must do that. You must say these commodities with high prices, which are the ones which are imported? Because those are more dangerous. Those are more dangerous. They are the ones which can take away all the blood and you remain dry. So blood without stopping. Some of the ideas people think about when confronted with high commodity prices are the idea of subsidy, government okutukwatirako, or removal of taxes by government from those commodities. With the imported commodities, this is a recipe for disaster. It will lead to collapse of the economy. Why? Let us take the example of petrol. A liter of petrol, before the rise of prices in November 2021, was Uganda shillings 4,590, which meant US dollars 1.3 at that time. A liter of petrol is now Uganda shillings 5,500, which means US dollars 1.48. This is all with the tax. The more expensive liter of petrol, ey'obuseere, kati liter eyo eya petrol efuuse liter ey'obuseere, has become an expensive liter, is doing two bad things. This liter is doing two bad things. One, emptying the pockets of the consumers, because the more liters you buy, the more empty you, the consumer, your pocket becomes. Eno liter y'obuseere enyinyweta akasente akali mu nsawo yo. This is one damage it is doing. But also emptying our national dollar reserves. So this expensive liter enyunyuta ebyaji bibiri, ekyaji kyo ekitono eky'omu nsawo n'ekyaji ky'eggwanga. Ekyaji is the Luganda word for the granary. Ekitara in Runyankore. I think in what they call it Enguri. In Acholi they call it Dero. Dero. I think in Natas they call it Edula or something like that. So this expensive liter of petrol is very dangerous because it is sucking money from pockets of individuals, and because when we buy from outside, we don't buy with Uganda shillings, we buy with the dollars. So it is also sucking dollars from our national reserve. More. We now have US dollars 4.5 billions in our reserve. Our reserves have grown. There used to be about $3 billion. They are now $4.5 billion in the reserve. These are enough to support imports for 4.2 months. Support imports normal like the way they were. When the prices were normal, they would support imports for 4.2 months. Now, when you bring these ones, if you have said these expensive ones, you need to watch out. If we subsidize or even just remove the taxes on imported commodities, the level of consumption will either remain the same, but this time each liter taking more dollars, or actually increase. So this idea of mtukwatireko, subsidize, or even remove the taxes, if the purchasing level remains the same, this dollar now, as you saw, has gone from 1.3. This liter has gone from $1.3 to 1.48. It has gone. So it's the same 1 liter, but it is taking more from your pocket and from our reserves. But to make matters worse, if they say subsidize, as people say, or remove the tax, then people can buy more, because the petrol will be cheaper. If they buy more hemorrhage from not only no, this time it's actually to be more hemorrhage from the national reserves. Because the people will not feel the hemorrhage in their pocket, but the reserves will be bleeding. The dollar drain will now increase per liter, and also worse, people may buy more of this expensive commodity. With the Great Lakes area, our region, there's another problem: smuggling, magendo. When an item is cheaper in one country, e.g. Uganda, there's a powerful incentive for smugglers to buy cheap in Uganda and sell expensively in the neighboring country. That is also another problem. Therefore, cheaper petrol in Uganda would be cheaper for the region, for the whole region. It would seriously encroach on our reserves. Moreover, the removal of taxes on some of the commodities would mean tax loss to the government of Uganda shillings 1.53 trillion for petroleum 1.15 trillion for diesel, and Uganda shillings 520 billion for wheat. If we were to remove the taxes, the dollars would go more from the reserves. Then the government would also lose, would not have taxes. How then do we fund our budget for the roads, electricity, schools, medicine, security, etc.? There are items we do not tax, e.g. medicine. We don't tax medicine. We don't tax it. We don't tax raw materials, etc. It is therefore not true that we tax everything. The very crucial items are not taxed. Therefore, removing taxes or subsidizing many of the imports is suicidal and a blunder. In my head, I had sympathy. Here I'm talking about removing tax on imported products or subsidizing them. This is suicidal and a blunder. Now, coming to the internally, in my head, I had sympathy for removing taxes on the locally produced goods such as sugar, milk, cement, etc. Because if people buy more of them, it will be good. They will be buying more local goods. This was until I went to the cabinet and looked at the taxes to be lost. On sugar, would lose Uganda shillings 193 billion in taxes. On cement, Uganda shillings 200 billion. On Mitayimbwa, steel bars, 120 billion. So these three alone, as you can see, are already in tax loss would be more than $500 billion, 500 billion. Now, if you go on the other side, a road like Kampala-Masaka, when we reconstructed it, we used 440 billion. So the money here that we would lose from that, just these, the tax would be like enough, more than enough, like what we used on reconstructing Kampala-Masaka. So that means all these plans we have planned, this road should be done, this road should be done, this one, this power here, this would now have to stop. All that would have to stop, and we simply consume more sugar, more what? Okay, that's good, but is it wise? Is it wise? Because we need to solve these big problems. The road, the electricity. But for the internal goods, what you would lose would be the taxes. Because there is no dollars, there are no dollars involved. You lose the taxes, you lose the taxes, and you would lose the plans which those taxes were supposed to implement. We could see that the route to tax cuts and subsidies, even for the locally produced goods, was not a wise one. What then is the wise way? The wise ways are therefore the following. Number one, to use frugally these imported items, kukekereza, kwerembaremba or kubyesonyiwa, to look for alternatives, if the alternatives are there. Either kukekereza or okwesonyiwa, by looking for alternatives. Number 2, to use our own raw materials, such as sunflower oil and castor oil and sugar, for soap, as we wait for the expanded palm oil production, which takes longer. But sunflower takes only 4 months. For bread, we can use our banana and cassava flour for bread making, apart from eating the traditional foods. For many years now, I do not eat wheat bread nor rice. I eat our richer indigenous foods of akaro, millet, muhogo, cassava, empogora, bananas cooked in their skin, ebinyobwa, groundnuts, obushaza, peas, and beef, inyama. Nearing 78 years of age in September, I'm doing very well on these foods. I really don't know why Africans would leave these foods. These foods, I was only eating rice when I was in Tanzania, and I had no alternative. But as soon as, ever since I came back, I don't think I've touched rice. 1979, you can imagine. Except when I go abroad, outside, that's when. I have no hesitation bearing testimony for our much better indigenous food. Millet is the only cereal in nature that has got protein, carbohydrates, and iron. The doctors are here. They can tell me whether there is any other that has got iron. I doubt very much. To have the three, protein, carbohydrates, and iron. I had also read something comparable for sorghum. However, for the indigenous sorghum, there was the problem of some bitterness. However, with the biotechnology by our researchers, the bitterness can be removed. We, the Ntungamoists, you can call me a Ntungamoist, can call me a man of Ntungamo. The only advantage we found in bread was convenience in storing and transporting. This is the advantage I saw in bread, because it is easier to store, to transport, like that. I don't know how long it lasts once it is baked. Does it last? But the flour of maize, of kalo, can stay for a long time. And the kalo can stay for a long time. So I think even the story maybe the advantage of bread, transporting and storing when ready for eating. Yeah. But the flour can last a long time. However, even that one of ready to eat, this is what Dr. Mranga in Nyaruzinga, in Bushenyi, is going to solve with the banana flour and cassava flour. which are much healthier than the wheat flour that has got the problem of dry gluten, which is 9.9%, and therefore is not good for human body. The scientists say that this wheat is not so good for the human body because of this gluten, which is in the wheat. The Minister of Agriculture is going to guide you as to how our farmers can upscale the production of the sunflower and castor oil seeds for vegetable oil, for soap making, as well as bananas and cassava for flour for bread. Sunflower takes just 4 months, and castor oil seeds and sugar take 140 to 180 days to produce pods. With palm oil, I hear that Indonesia and Malaysia have banned the export of that item, and therefore removing the tax will not change anything. This leaves the problem of petrol and diesel, products for which we do not have an easy local replacement until our own oil comes on stream in 2025, with the first production and the refinery expected in 2026. And we refine some of it for the final products. Even before the war in Ukraine, the price of fuel was going up on account of the worry by the fossil fuel producers of the global movement for clean energy: solar, wind, nuclear, geothermal, hydropower, and hydrogen. Because there is that movement, which is a good movement, to go from fossil, this oil, to this, which has got some, which produces carbon dioxide, which interferes with the atmosphere, with these cleaner sources of energy: solar, wind, nuclear, geothermal, hydropower, hydrogen. There was a conference in Scotland, and there was a plan to within some coming years, to get petroleum out, and we go to electric cars and so on. Now, because of that, on account of that fear, the petroleum companies were apparently no longer exploring for new reserves. Because of that, okwera kiroko nti ebya oil bigenda kukomeyo maso, looking for new oil, they stopped. Yet, the new clean energies would take time to be available. The Russian-Ukraine war has made it worse. Just before the Ukrainian war, the price of crude was US $80 per barrel. It is now US $114 per barrel. Therefore, the Ukrainian war has added another US $34 per barrel. Of course, this is an artificial addition caused by the countries of the global north, the Bazungu, mishandling their bilateral relations and also mishandling global affairs as well. We are quietly engaging these actors to see how these actors can remove this artificial burden from the world, because now this extra $34 is really caused by our Bazungu friends. Because the Bazungu are the ones involved in all this. The Bazungu of Buraya, Europe, the ones of America, and the ones of Russia. So we are talking with them quietly. I don't want to go into the details here, but this is artificial. The real structural problem of the oil is the $80, the $80. But this extra 34 can be removed. Because, for instance, I hear, because you see the Wazungu are fighting. They have now boycotted Russian oil. So Russia has got the oil, but I hear now Russia has reduced the amount of oil they are refining every day by 1 million barrels a day, because the other Bazungu have boycotted this. And because of that, you have the shortage. So this is artificial. It's not the other one. The other one of worrying about the future of oil is more structural, is more organic with the problem. So if it was the only one, I think we would end up like $80. That's what it was. That's what it was before the Ukrainian war. So this one is solvable. Even the problem of wheat, those who want wheat, because the Russians have blockaded the Ukrainian ports, and I hear within the ports there are 25 million tons of wheat. So even the wheat eaters could do, if these people, if they are a bit humble, because the problem is humility. Everybody everybody berege. Buli omu yemanyi nti yekitalo. Naye singa byetowazako, both the wheat and the oil, the petroleum, and even the fertilizers. You remember the fertilizers are also a problem because they are produced by Russia, I hear. So this one, rather than saying that that we should waste our money, our reserves and abandon our plans, because of the these wars among these people. We would rather persuade them so that we continue with our plans for infrastructure, for what, and try to persuade these people to please remove your artificial problem. If they agree, good. If they don't, we create a higher base for ourselves, where we can say bye-bye, you can continue with your own things, we are safer. Instead of aborting our journey for these temporary and irrational positions by others, then we shall not be safer. They may not. It may continue for a long time. Do we abort our journey indefinitely or what? So that's why this one, I think the short term the answer is diplomatic engagement with these actors who have caused this problem. Nevertheless, this artificial distortion should not divert us from our long-distance journey of achieving socio-economic transformation, because that is the only way of not only increasing our affluence, but also immunizing ourselves against the mistakes of others. We need to continue until we achieve immunity from the mistakes of others. And I can say already we have some immunity. We already have some immunity because of what has been done, in spite of being obstructed by some elements within Uganda that many times delay our programs. The way we have been able to transcend the recent challenges of locusts. You remember locusts? locusts, there's an organization called Desert Locust Control. It never did anything. We controlled the locusts ourselves because we had the capacity. Who helped us control the locusts? Nobody. How about the floating islands? Nobody. I even tried to contact some people. Nobody. How about the rising water? That water would have caused a lot of damage, but the good thing is that we had increased the outlet. In 1964, when the water rose up, the water which could go through the Spirit Channel was 1,300 cubic meters per second. 1964. If we still were like that, those dams would have been flooded. But now, we can go to 4,000 cubic meters per second. That's how we were able to handle it. So the idea that we slow down our capacity building in order to deal with these temporary issues is very dangerous because we may be overtaken by problems. We would rather okekereza the problems that face us and continue building capacity, because it is that which will now immunize us even for the future. Even with the high commodity prices, we are still doing much better than many countries in the world. Our inflation has risen from 2.7% before the artificial crisis to 4.9% now. Our inflation is now 4.9. Compare this with other countries. UK, 9%. USA, 8.3%. France, 4.8%. Germany, 7.4%. Italy, 6%. Spain, 8.3%. Russia, 17.8%. China, 2.1%. Those are the ones who are lower than us. Kenya, 6.47%. Tanzania is also lower than us, 3.8%. Rwanda, 10.5%. Ghana, 23.6%. Why is the inflation still down here compared to other countries? Because of what we did. We have more milk. We have more maize. We have more bananas, more Irish potatoes, more sugar. Now, suppose we had not built that capacity. Where would we be now? So that's why being diverted by this temporary, then you abandon your long-term journey is a big mistake. If it was not for the endless obstructions to our programs, e.g., the palm oil project in Buvuma, Sango Bay would even be much better off. With our coming petroleum, our coming oil, Uganda will be immune to the external disruptions. Working with our African brothers, Uganda and Africa will be prosperous, irrespective of the actions of the mistake makers, short of using nuclear weapons among themselves, which may affect the whole world. Let us, therefore, not be diverted. We are self-sufficient in food, maize, bananas, cassava, milk, beef, Irish potatoes, beans, peas, fruits, etc. This is one of the most important factors of survival in terms of peril like this. When you have got a problem, this is the biggest factor of survival. Some of the countries in parts of the world, they are very in a bad situation now. Because they depend, I hear some of them depend 80% on wheat from some other place. I don't want to mention countries. But for us, we have these other foods. The other one is, if it's there, you eat it. If it's not, you will survive. So we are already doing, because of what we did in the past, we are safe. Because we have most of the things we need. We have got good infrastructure. We have got electricity, surplus electricity. Good roads in many parts of the country. Educated manpower. We have got good infrastructure. We have a strong army for guaranteeing peace. And we are beginning to pay our scientists well. This question of paying scientists is very, very crucial if you want to have, because with our scientists, we are now making everything except aeroplanes. We are making the cars, electric car, Chira. We are making the vaccines. We are making the agro processed products, agro-processed products. only the plane we are not making now. The rest we can make ourselves. But we need a market. That's why we must work with the African brothers, apart from the internal market. Nothing can stop us from growing if we work with our African brothers and sisters and other people of goodwill. Actually, in my opinion, the only really serious vulnerabilities for Uganda are two. Continuing to depend so much on rain-fed agriculture and the damage to our incomparably good environment by the encroaching on the wetlands, lake shores, river banks, forests, and steep gradient mountain cliffs. To me, these are the only two danger points. We must move away from rain-fed agriculture only and do irrigation. And then protect our environment. Because it is the environment which gives us the rain and the water. I have agreed with both the Ministries of Agriculture on enhanced irrigation and with the Ministry of Environment on restoring our wetlands by promoting fish farming on the edges instead of drying them with swamp rice growing, restoring the forest etc. We should even agree with the coastal countries, Tanzania and Kenya, on possibly using nuclear energy to desalinate seawater as an insurance in the face of the erraticness of the rain caused by the sabotage by the mistakes of the global mistake makers. Me, lack of rain when we don't have irrigation, it would be the only thing that would worry me. That's the one big crisis we should plan for. And in the budgets, especially of the other year, we shall have to do much more on irrigation. In conclusion, I repeat that the only really serious dangers to our future are reliance on only rain-fed agriculture, damage to our environment, and a nuclear war among the mistake makers. We need to advise our friends, the Wazungu, to please find other ways of how to solve these problems. During the State of the Nation address on the 7th of June 2022, I will touch on the issue of the so-called coffee deal that was being discussed in Parliament the other day. I could see fundamental disorientation in the position of some of the speakers that were speaking in Parliament. Uganda, indeed Africa, being in a slave relationship with the external actors is not comparable to any other factors. But I will speak on this, on that occasion in detail. I don't want to touch here and there. To recapitulate, to summarize, we need to know and do the following. Number one, subsidies for and removing taxes from imported products is definite suicide because it will deplete both the family savings and the national reserves, leading to inability to pay for imports because foreigners beyond East Africa do not accept the Uganda shilling as a unit of exchange. They insist on the dollar, gold, etc. Secondly, the correct action is to kukekereza, being frugal, kweremba, or these are the ones from outside, or kubyesonyiwa, getting alternatives for the non-oil items, With the internally produced commodities, I was tempted to look at removing taxes because with these, increased consumption would favor Uganda. However, the tax loss of Uganda shillings 193 billion for sugar, 200 billion for cement, 120 billion for mtayimbwa, would cripple our budget and the planned developments. Some of these challenges are temporary. We have been having the phenomenon of low commodity prices because you remember we had very low prices for matoke, you remember. The other year, we had very low prices for matoke, very low prices for maize. You remember, just go back the other year. Even milk. So this cycle, low prices, too much production this year, then low prices, then next year, we cannot, it's not safe to continue like that. We have been having the phenomenon of low commodity prices, e.g. for maize. It is the continued development of the economy that will get us to the stability of a more integrated economy. Because you see, like for instance, if you say we have got a chengera of maize, too much maize, so the price collapses. That collapsing is artificial. Because although we say we have got too much maize, you find that we are still importing animal feed, chicken feed, animal feed from Kenya. And yet maize is the ingredient for making chicken feed. So when we say there's too much maize, we are only talking about maize for kaunga, for posho, for ET. So what is the answer? The answer is to continue developing, not to be diverted by these temporary problems, and then you abandon the long-term answer, which is now develop capacity to use maize fully. Number one, kaunga, posho. Number two, all types of animal feed, chicken feed, feed for fish, because all these are imported. How can you say the maize is too much when you are also importing animal feed, chicken feed from Kenya, you are importing fish meal from somewhere? All this can be made from maize. So rather than be diverted, let's continue. You will find that in future, the maize is totally fully used and the prices are stable because you will broaden the uses. You will broaden the uses of maize instead of only being for posho. And when posho is covered, then nobody buys maize. And yet you have got other needs of maize. It is the continued development of the economy that will get us to the stability of a more integrated economy. Only a few months ago, I opened a new factory of industrial sugar at Kinyara. Because you remember, we were quarreling with Kenya, with Tanzania, for not buying our sugar. We had a surplus. We have a surplus. Before, the other day, I opened a factory in Chiriandongo. Just 4 days ago, another factory, which is adding another 85,000 tons. So we are now going from 600,000 tons of sugar to 700,000. But our raw sugar for chai, for tea, our consumption is 380,000. So we are crying, ngatufude wanange, ebikado kamara, ebikado sukari. No, but this is all artificial because there is sugar, which is called industrial sugar, which is needed for making soft drinks, for Coca-Cola, needed for syrups, for medicines. We didn't have that. We were importing it. And I think we were spending like $30 million. And we were importing about 100,000. So we were crying that we had too much sugar, yet we were importing industrial sugar, the refined sugar. So what is the answer? The answer, instead of being diverted, is to develop capacity and like we have done now in Kinyara, we opened the factory for industrial sugar. So apart from the 380,000, which is used for chai, now we have got an extra 100,000, which needs to be processed into industrial sugar so that we stop importing industrial sugar. And we're also planning to convert sugar into ethanol and use it as petroleum so that this business of having too much 1 year and then the prices go down and then next year we are not likely to have any shortage from the internal products. It is only the external ones that can be in shortage. Therefore, rather than abort our work, let's continue. You will see that we shall cover all these gaps by not stopping. If we stop to kumagamaga, we shall be creating problems for ourselves. Only a few months ago, I opened a new factory of industrial sugar in Chinyara. This is the sugar that is used in Coca-Cola as refined sugar, different from raw sugar for tea. It is also used for medicines like children's syrups. Its opening was helping us to tackle the issue of surplus sugar. There are plans to get petrol out of our sugar. With that phenomenon of more integrated economy, the instability of a Chengera is the surplus, with low prices today, and then Ebola shortage with high prices tomorrow will be tamed. So that we have, even for the producers, it will be better. For instance, with the milk producers, we went from 200 million liters, now we are at 2.8 billion liters of milk. And when we were depending only on liquid milk, the market had disappeared. But then we went to powdered milk, which could be taken out. And later on, there is a factory in Yantonde there, after Yantonde, producing what they call casein, making protein out of milk. So you find that to get out of this erraticness, too much production, low prices, then people go bankrupt and run out, and then there's a shortage. It is to develop a broad spectrum of industrial capacity which covers not only one item, not liquid milk only, not just powdered milk, but also the proteins out of the milk, but also the butter, the ghee, and all that, so that the product is fully used. The other day, I was having a meeting with the Indians. They are coming to work with us how to use the banana stem. Forget about the banana for eating. Even the stem at Omtumba, the stem itself, has got so many uses. We can make textiles out of banana fibers. Textiles, we can make fertilizers, we can make even nutritional something, omnyoma wheat. The core there apparently has got some nutritional values. So it is that development that will stabilize what we are doing. So therefore, rather than being diverted now, when we succeed here, we shall remain with the original reason of the fossil fuels being worried about the clean energy sources. That will be much better than where we are now. It is important for Ugandans to know that even when we get our own petroleum, we cannot sell it below the world prices minus transport costs. Because even when we get our own petroleum, we have to sell it at world prices minus transport, because we shall not include the cost going to the ocean or coming from the ocean. But otherwise, you cannot sell it below the market price, because if you do, you create the other problem of incentive for smuggling, where they buy cheap here, they go and sell in Congo, they go and sell. It's not. All these things need planning and strategy, not emotions. With these few words, I thank everybody and I wish you good luck. Thank you very much.